Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, sisters and brothers. Welcome to this July 2nd edition of Smart Church Amplified. I am honored and glad that you paused in whatever was happening in your life to come in and to share with us. You know me, I'm trying to look around to make sure that all of the electronics are working as they should. Let me get us to the chat box because I know I need to pay attention because that's where the real teaching is going to happen. What's up to everybody that have let yourself be known in the chat box, and welcome, welcome, welcome to everybody that's remaining on the periphery. We appreciate everybody who is with us tonight. You know what? We used to do this back in the pandemic when we first started communicating like this. If you have time and if you will, please take a moment and use your contacts in your phone or whatever you have to invite somebody. Let somebody know that we are on live right now, and they will be blessed. What's up, Sister Gatlin? And they will be blessed to be a part of this particular conversation. I call it a conversation on purpose. You already know that I am not here to teach alone. We are in this thing together. And I certainly look forward to hearing uh, and to witnessing what you are going to teach us tonight. Is July 2nd, which means tomorrow is the 3rd, which means Friday is the 4th of July. And as I shared with them at the noon hour, I hardly ever come to this particular season or time of the year without taking some time to both read and reflect Frederick Douglass's July 5th um, speech, What to the Slave is the 4th of July. I'd invite you to do the same. You know, with technology, we can accomplish a lot. And so you can just Google What to the Slave is the 4th of July, where Mr. Douglass takes this idea of America to task for being hypocritical in the presence of God. You should really check it out and take some time to reflect upon what he had to say to these yet to be United States of America, in the words of Maya Angelou. I'm just going to kind of talk us to give other people time to get in. But we had some kind of celebration this weekend for our 100th church anniversary worship service. If you were not here, then check us out on YouTube. But being in the place was something special. Thank you to all of you who did what you could. And made that day special for the rest of us. I dare not try to call names because I know we were still slaves in 1776. That's exactly his point, Sister Lemaire. That's exactly his point. How you gonna talk about freedom and you holding slaves? And by the way, the biggest slave holder was the so-called father of the country, the founding father. And I have learned to say that George Washington is not my daddy, because he was one of the biggest holders of slaves and one of the biggest thieves of land there was in these so-called colonies. You're absolutely right, Miss Lamel. How we gonna celebrate the 4th of July? But we're not gonna talk about that tonight. We're not gonna go off into that. I was trying to say that the 100th year worship service was something special. If you were not here, please go back and check it out on YouTube. Um, uh, let's see. I got some bad news today, and then we'll get into the lesson. What's up to everybody? Still coming in. I got some bad news today. The Reverend Gladys Williams has transitioned. She's an ancestor now. So remember her family in prayer. Tentatively, we're going to have her funeral here at Elm Grove, not this Friday, but the next Friday. But you'll be hearing more of that as we move closer to the date. All right, we should have given people enough time. Welcome into the space. Let's get to it. We are still talking about power for the people. And my point is that because of who you are, because of whose you are, and because of what God has given you, we can expect that we will have to have our share of battles, challenges, things, situations, circumstances, and people will come against you. In fact, I will say to you that if you read your sacred text and set it next to a history book, a world history book, you will see that since about the 13th, 14th, or 15th century, the people of this world have been coming at Africa's children, God's children, every time you turn around, and it has not stopped yet. And look at you, in spite of all of that, we are still standing. Imagine that. Think about all that God has allowed you to accomplish and all that God has given to you, knowing that the forces of evil would like nothing better than to make you incapacitated, to get rid of you. And we are still here together. And so I want us to realize and recognize that kind of power, not only that is given to us, but that is at work in our lives. If we ever get that down, and I'm convinced that we don't have it yet, right? We don't have it yet after about some 350 years of the Black church in this hemisphere. We still don't get it yet. But when we do, this world better watch out. We will be unstoppable. And this is not just about race, white or black. This is about everybody who loves righteousness, who stands for justice, everybody who wants the will of God to be done while we're here on this earth. When we get it down, I'm trying to tell you, we are going to be a force to not just to reckon with, but evil better get out of the way. So that's why we're talking about this, and we're taking our time. We're not confining ourselves to a 4 or 5 week period, but we stop when God says to stop. That being said, join me in the book of Deuteronomy, book number 5, chapter 20, verses 1 through 4. Let me count on my fingers and make sure I said the right number, right? Yeah, book number 5. I got it. Deuteronomy chapter 20, verses 1 through 4. Deuteronomy chapter 20, verses 1 through 4 is going to be our text for our conversation tonight. Yeah, we're moving in the right direction. All right, I like that, Sister Betsy. We are moving in the right direction. Deuteronomy 20, verses 1 through 4. I'm going to read the New International Version. It says, when you go to war against your enemies, pause right there, which says you will go to war against your enemies. When you go to war against your enemies and see horses and chariots and an army greater than yours, do not be afraid of them, because the Lord your God, who brought you up out of Egypt, will be with you. Verse 2. When you're about to go into battle, the priest shall come forward and address the army. He shall say, hear, Israel, today you're going into battle against your enemies. Do not be faint-hearted or afraid. Do not panic or be terrified by them. For the Lord your God is the one who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies to give you the victory. That is the reading of the sacred word. I started this way at the noon conversation, or in the noon conversation, and I think it's worth going back and talking about. We were given the King James Version of the Bible in 1611. That coincides with the beginnings of the start of the British Empire. In fact, that's when Great Britain began to move around the world and steal people's land and kill indigenous people and claim land that did not belong to them. At the height of the British Empire, when they were saying the sun never sets on the British Empire, they probably owned or claimed about a third of the then known world, the then known land, right? When they began to venture out in their thieving ways, we were given a version of the Bible. Now we need to go back and say that around the 13th century, the Latin Vulgate was used. Vulgate means the Latin translation of the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, and the Greek version of the New Testament, right? But it was limited until, some of you remember from school, the Gutenberg press. But in 1611, the British, or King James more specifically, put out their version of the Hebrew Bible and the Greek Bible. That's why we get all of the Elizabethan language, these and thous and so forth. But it makes sense if you connect history, secular history to sacred history. It makes sense that people who were dead set on pillaging, on stealing, on murderous acts would put out a sacred book that made it look like they were given the God-given, they had God's favor, right? And God-given right to take whatever they wanted and to kill whoever they wanted, and to teach the so-called others, mostly indigenous people, to be passive and to accept. Slaves, obey your masters in the New Testament, right? The Greek New Testament. So it makes sense that they would put out this book. You heard the phrase before, but let me remind you, I don't know to whom it is attributed, but you remember the quote that the missionaries went to Africa, or came to Africa with the Bible. They told us to close our eyes. When we opened our eyes again, we had the Bible and they had our land, right? And so it makes sense that religion and this book that purports a certain kind of religion that is not of God would go forth at the same time. And I would suggest to you, sisters and brothers, that every day we are in a similar type battle. We're in a battle with the same people that decided in the 15th and 16th century, latter 16th century and the early 17th century on to just go and pillage the earth. Think about that. They decided they were going to go and steal the whole earth. And they did so by controlling currency. Now, currency, we think of money. I buy something from you, or you give me a service and I pay you for that service. But I would suggest to you that currency is more than just what we call money. Currency is land. Currency is philosophy. Currency is religion. Currency is education. Currency can be labor. and so on and so on. My point is, there's a small group that decided way back then and continues to this day to control, to do their best to control what is called, what we consider currency, or what is used in exchange and as valuable, right? And even today, that same small group of so-called straight, white, male Christians fight against any and everybody every day that is a threat to their control. Believe me when I tell you that the very fact, right, that you decided that you're going to serve the true and the living God and not the God of somebody's imagination that gives them fake favor, the very fact that your skin has been kissed by the African sun, the very fact that you have learned to think critically for yourself and not to believe everything that they tell you makes you a threat to their so-called control. In fact, I would tell you that every day, whether we realize it or not, we are in a battle, just like Deuteronomy chapter 20 talks about. Now let's keep going. This gives way, points out to us, and even if we look at Deuteronomy chapter 20, we can fold that in, or perhaps that's one of the main points, that it promotes this kind of arrogance among those who practice the Judeo-Christian faith. Now, this is not the only text that does so, but a great deal of what Deuteronomy talks about is the acquisition and the maintenance of land. Go in and take the land. March 7 times around Jericho and take the land. Cross the Jordan River, like Miles talked about Sunday with these stones. Cross the Jordan River and take what I give you, what I say you can have. It doesn't matter that people are already living there. And so here's what the book allows for. The dismissal of other people's gods and worship traditions. People were already living in Canaan when Israel got there, right? People had their worship traditions, but never mind that. Smashed them and smashed their gods. It's the divine right to kill everyone that does not worship like we worship. We'll get to that in a moment. The divine right to possess their land, take it from them. And the divine right to condemn to hell everybody who does not worship like you worship. We find that happening even in the Christian tradition, among the many denominations of which we have split ourselves, that I think is ungodly, right? I know a number of you who are in this space with us tonight can testify that somebody has either hinted or told you outright that you're going to hell because you don't speak in tongues, that you're not really saved, right? Why does this come out? I mentioned last week a book by Sven Lindquist called Exterminate All the Brutes, where he kind of lays this out, this Western, especially Europe, thievery of the lands across the globe, right? And it's that kind of an attitude. Brutes are the people who are not like us. In our tradition, we call it heretics. In the Muslim tradition, they call it infidels. If you're not like us, then you're not worthy to be treated like you are human, right? If you think about it in our context, we really have a lot of nerves as Christians to say that if somebody doesn't call God what you call God, or if somebody doesn't sit still and keep their hands in their lap, during the worship time and don't talk back to the preacher. Or on the flip side of that, if somebody doesn't shout or wave their hands and stand up and jump up and down and run around the church, then there's something wrong with them, right? Kendrick Lamar said they're not like us. They're not like us. But we have nerve enough to judge. Let's go back to the Muslims. The Muslims, those who are extreme, not practicing real Islam, but some twisted version of Islam that says we ought to kill all of the so-called infidels, kill everybody that's not like us. And we have nerve enough to judge people. But when is the last time you sat back and read the books of Deuteronomy and Joshua that say the same thing? And the most damnable thing about all of this is people who confess Jesus Christ. Now we're moving into what we call the New Testament. People who profess Jesus Christ in this day and age are the people who are doing the most damaging work to people who are just trying to live their lives. It's professed Christians, if you think about it. Now we're going to talk about what's in the news. It's professed Christians that are demanding that those who are not like us, so-called people who are not from our country, illegal citizens, that's another story, that they are, kidnapped off the streets, detained, and then deported. And these are people who are just trying to, go to work, get a job, do better for my family. Think about it. It's a professed Christian, MAGA Mike Johnson, right? That owns a Bible, that goes to church, that says he goes to church and it is known for quoting scripture and so forth. But he is the one that is pushing that big ugly bill, the one big ugly bill. Let's give it its proper. That's Mike Johnson doing Trump's work. And so what that says to us is it's a person who has a profession of faith, but really puts the word of that felon in chief above what the word of God says. As much as they talk about they love God and Jesus is the Christ and so forth, they must not be reading what Jesus taught. Just write this one down, Luke chapter 10. You can go back and read that one for yourself. That's the one with the Good Samaritan. Remember Luke chapter 10, the smart aleck lawyer wanted to know, well, how shall I get to heaven? And answer for himself, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And then he wanted to get smart and ask, well, who is my neighbor? And then Jesus went into the story of the Good Samaritan and explained that we are all one another's neighbors. So how can I be your neighbor if you passing a bill that's going to cut off my grandmother's, or it might be even my Medicaid, right? By the way, when you have time, go back and check Pastor Fred Jeff Smith in what the Shiloh Church calls Staying in Prayer. Well, he really breaks down the statistics of how this bill is going to affect Louisiana and how damaging this bill is going to be. And all of our congresspersons except Cleo Fields and the guy from New Orleans, Troy Carter, but the rest, I think there's 5 or 6 others, they all voted for this foolishness, including a physician. Think about that. But we love God and Jesus is love, and come on in, brother, and sit with us and worship. And how is this so effective? It is so effective because of the use of propaganda. It started again way in the like 14th, 15th, 13th, 14th, 15th century when the Portuguese first started going down into Africa up to this day, right? Those people will make up lies against people that are not like them. You know, men lie on women, say they're the weaker vessels, misinterpreting the Bible. You know, and then the race thing, well, that's completely out of hand. You know, going to the right schools, everything, whatever we can find to separate us, it seems like we do. That's the way the devil works in our minds, if you really think about it. Evil, Beelzebub, Satan, whatever. That's the way propaganda, right? Temptation is nothing but propaganda. You won't get caught. Everybody else doing it. It don't matter. This is not really a sin. All lies, all propaganda. That's the way the temptation works. That's the way evil works against us in our own minds that says you won't survive this, right? You are not good enough. Those people don't like you, so you shouldn't like them, right? They talking about you behind your back. All of that stuff that causes damage to our consciousness is nothing but propaganda. And if we are not careful, it will work on us. Propaganda in the world around us, right? The Haitians are eating cats and dogs. As stupid as that is, propaganda, right? Mexico is sending all of its rapists to our country. Nothing but propaganda. All, all lies. Kamala Harris is stupid. Jasmine Crockett is ghetto. All of that stuff that they say. All propaganda. And the thing about it is, the people who use propaganda understand it does not have to be true as long as your audience believes it. A lot of times we have to remind ourselves when they're saying stupid stuff, they're not talking to you because you have good sense. You have critical thinking skills. They're talking to those people that are going to believe them, that believe them if they walk out and say the sky is not blue. And as hard as it is for us to understand, there are people who think and believe like that, right? There are people in personal relationships. If one says something outlandish, the other is going to believe it, whether it is true or not. So what we find happening as we introduce the conversation for tonight is, and you'll want to put this in your notes, religion without morality. People who act like that and make these grand professions, what they're doing is they're practicing religion without morality. It's the ability, again, to profess Christ as your Savior or say that God can do anything but fail. You can claim that as a belief, as a part of a belief system, but there's no behavior to match the profession, right? You can say a lot of stuff, but our behavior and the way we treat one another does not match what we say. We see that happening in our churches almost every time we gather. People who say they love God, but then walk past you and don't speak to you. Or like the elder would say, walk over your feet and act like you're not even there. Francis says to us, giving us scriptures, thank God. Which one is that? 1 Corinthians or 2 Corinthians 10 and 5, and how it pertains to what we allow in our thoughts. Help us out, 1 or 2 Corinthians, but we want to write it down. When you give us scripture, we want it. Thank you. So that's religion without morality. Yeah, which one is it? First or Second Corinthians? And Sister Nancy Dennis has given us scripture as well. 1 John 4:20. If someone says, I love God and hates his brother, he's a liar. Right on time. He's a liar. Weak-minded people believe anything. You're right, Sister Gatler. Second Corinthians, thank you, Francis. 2 Corinthians 10:5. You want to write that one down, go back and check it out. And while you're writing, while you're putting it in your notes, don't forget 1 John 4:20. Thank you. So this religion without morality, Reverend Otis Moss, the third, not Junior, the third puts it this way. And he's talking to the Black church when he says this, by the way. He says that we have to be careful that we don't have faith that does not include love. Thank you, thank you. We got it, sis, or brother. So I think is that Francis Slack? Help us out. Yeah, it is possible to claim faith with no love. And when you claim faith with no love, then what happens is the dogma and the traditions and you name it, right? We only wear this color on this Sunday kind of stuff. You got to keep your head covered or take that hat off. All of that kind of stuff becomes more important than the person. And so we practice the traditions and the rituals, and traditions and rituals are not bad in and of themselves. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that when that kind of stuff becomes more important than the person, than somebody's humanity, than meeting somebody's needs, then that's when we find ourselves, as Reverend Moss would say, practicing faith that includes no love. And I just believe that God would prefer us to have more love than we talk about faith. When we find ourselves in that kind of a trap, then we'll find ourselves being guilty of the very thing that of which we accuse other people. Think about that one. We find ourselves, and that's how this thing works. Back up to the propaganda. That's how all of this works. If you accuse other people of doing the very thing that you are doing. Let's see. Man, to call somebody a brute or a heretic, right? When your behavior shows that, you're the one that's really acting like that. How many of those doggone police videos have we seen where the police are beating the daylights out of somebody and at the same time telling them not to resist? Right? You're doing the very thing and shout out to the good police persons, the women and men who are really out there serving and protecting. But how many times have we seen that? Or, we see where the person who is under attack is trying to back away and be calm, and the policeman is the one who escalates. The police person is the one who escalates the situation and then accuses, I'm gonna call him the victim in this situation. So we got to be careful, right? Be careful to guard our consciousness, guard ourselves against religion without morality or faith without love. I missed to see Sister Charlene Anthony. It's a major difference between leaders and followers as it relates to the situation in this country. So many people refuse to read or think for ourselves. Just sign right here. Just sign right here. Reminds me of my man with his marker lot. Yes, indeed. Thank you, sis. So that's the overall picture, right? So what we see happening in in Deuteronomy, it gives us the image of God preparing, or Moses preparing the people to go into the promised land. This consists of Moses' final speeches or sermons, right? Right before God takes Moses into becoming an ancestor. And what we see is, you can really, if you go back and listen to Dr. King's speech in Memphis and read the book of Deuteronomy, they are very, very similar to one another. The situation is similar. And then the last thing, Deuteronomy closes out the Pentateuch, right? The first 5 books. And we know, and we'll just repeat it again for somebody who hasn't heard it, that these books were not recorded in real time, right? In fact, I seriously question, fall just short of saying that they're wrong, that Moses could not have written this. These were stories that the people of God heard over and over. It was mouth to ear communication, much like much of what we know about ourselves, about our family, right? Mouth to ear, we're going to talk about this. But now when the people were in exile hundreds of years later, and God said, you're coming back home, and then the Persians start sending the Jews back to their so-called promised land, that's when they decided, we need to start writing these stories down. That's how we get the first 5 books of the Bible, right? So let's walk it through. I hope we're still together. If you check out verse 1, it mentions something called a battle. When you go out to battle, look at it now. It doesn't say if. It doesn't say there's a possibility. It says when you go out, it is as if God is prophesying, or God is saying to the people of God, you're going into a blessing, but now the blessing will not come without its challenges. I want you to check that out, sisters and brothers, because somehow we can get caught up in this theology that it is by your faith that you'll never, ever go through anything, have any challenges, have any sicknesses. Everybody's going to be on your side. The so-called wind is going to be at your back. But anybody who loves God, that's living in the world, in this world, knows that we are going to have some battles. And it is as if God is saying here, when you go into the battle, right? Because you're going to have to fight against some things, some situations, and some people that are going to fight against you. In fact, when you keep reading the text, the Bible calls them, verse 1 calls them enemies. Now, enemy, God is specific about this. God says the enemy, the word used there is the one that is hostile toward you. This is not somebody who just talks about you. This is not just somebody who opposes you being blessed and saying what you don't deserve. This is somebody that tries to prevent you from reaching the next phase, from getting to where you're trying to go, right? Doing what they can physically. And we know that every battle has a spiritual beginning. And so spiritually doing what they can to prevent you, to prevent us from reaching the places that we say God has designed us to be. God says you will have some battles. As a matter of fact, these battles will come from very real enemies that intend hostility towards you. And then God says, do not be intimidated. The Lord says, their army may be bigger than yours. They may have the latest and the greatest technology, but don't you let them intimidate you. In fact, in a real sense, God is showing us how to handle those situations where the problem seems too big. Have you ever been there before? Situations where the trouble seems, or the challenge seems impossible. That's what this is. When you see all of their technology, and when you see their great or grand army, right? That looks to me like this thing is too big. There's no way I'm going to face this. No way I can handle this. And you know how we do in church. There's all kinds of examples we can use there. But what jumps out at me is the Lord is saying, well, first of all, you already know in church language, it may be too big for us, but it's never too big for God, right? But what got me is our behavior. Remember, we're talking about when we realize our power, or the power that is given to us, the power that is at work within us, then we will be unstoppable. I think that there are many of us, many people who love God and are sincere in their relationship with God and God's people, but we don't even try when the challenges come our way because we think it's too much for us to handle, right? Many of us see things that are not right and we don't get involved because we think it's too much for us to handle. In fact, it may not be you, but you know some people that have accepted and are still putting up with some stuff, right? Still putting up with some stuff because you think to stand against it and to make it stop, to make it go away, whatever the case may be, you think that it is too much for us to handle. But I would suggest to you that we are charged with doing justice, loving mercy, and walking humbly with God. That is why we address situations. It's not enough for us to deal with surface of a situation, the results of a situation, although sometimes you have to address that first. But the real challenge to us is to deal with that thing that seems like it is too much for us to handle. Deal with the thing that is causing the problem, causing the trouble, causing the injustice, right? It's not enough to feed a sister or brother. That's good. You meet the immediate need, but we need to figure out why they're hungry and fix that part. And by the way, with this big ugly bill, there are going to be a lot of people who are struggling because all of the prices are going up. Taxes are going up on us. You name it, it's going to be some issues, right? And so how do we deal with it? Well, we meet the immediate need, help a sister or brother out, right? But then at the midterms, we go in and deal with the root cause of the problem, which is those jokers who are sitting in those seats, and we vote them out. You have to deal with what's causing the problem, because if you keep sticking a Band-Aid on it and it keeps getting hit, well, it's never going to heal, right? Let's see. Sister Nancy Dennis says Joshua and Caleb understood what they were facing. They said, we are more than able. Thank you, sis. We are more than able to take the land. That's Joshua chapter 14, verse 6. Joshua chapter 14. I think that's Numbers. Numbers chapter 14, verse 6. The book of Numbers 14 and 6. It's Charlene Anthony challenging us. Put it on the t-shirt. Stick it on your refrigerator. Is it going to be fear or faith? We have to decide that. Fear or faith. So deal with the issue, right? Fix the thing that's wrong. Notice now that God says the priest will address the army. That lets us know, right, that this is a religious duty. This is a spiritual concern. This is not just some go knock them down, get up, pat yourself on the back for the victory. No. Or this is not just some, oh no, that's too much for me. I don't have time for that. And people ain't bothering me. I ain't. Mm-mm. If the priest is talking, that lets us know this is a religious duty, right? This is a part of our faith to address the issue, even if it appears too much for us. This is our religious duty. This is the practice of our faith, is what I'm trying to say, right? The priest says that you will have that in this battle, right? Don't you let them intimidate you. Don't you let them make you turn around in fear. In a real sense, what we can say is, Sister Anthony saying, we need to vote in some real God-fearing politicians that have love for the people and the country. Exactly. And not these people that have a profession but not a behavior. Because the truth is, well, I'm gonna zip my lips on that one. I'm gonna leave that one there. So with the priest showing up with the word from the Lord reminds me, and you want to write this one down, of Psalms number 107, 107, verses 17 and 20, right? It talks about how when the people were in trouble and they were badly hurt, badly bruised, they were in trouble. Remember, trouble is that thing that kind of boxes you in. They were in trouble. They were broken, badly bruised, and the psalmist says, God sent the word to heal them and deliver them. Think about that part. The people were in a tight spot, in trouble, a tight spot. The people were broken and battered and bruised, and God sent the word, sent the priest. The priest spoke the word of God to the people, right? This is not about magic. When we're talking about God sent the word and the word healed them and delivered them. No, this is God at work, right? This is God at work giving us the kind of right mind and way of thinking so that we can come together, so that we can think with one another and work with one another to get ourselves out of this tight situation. It's not magic. God is not just going to wave a wand. No, God sends the word to trigger our minds. So now we're thinking correctly and thinking together so that we can work together to get out of whatever this is. Look at the message of the priest. The priest says, don't let them think that you're soft or weak. This is the priest talking. Don't let them think you soft or weak. Don't anticipate evil outcomes. Don't run away from them in fear, and do not be intimidated by them. The priest says, you're going into battle, and don't you act like an animal that's a coward. You know, an animal that's a coward shows their tail as they run away. Don't you act like that, right? And finally, in verse 4, right, verse 4 of it all, God promises, I'm going to be with you and I'm going to fight for you. I will save you. I'll be with you. I'll fight for you. I will save you. So what is the message? First is the message of courage on our part. One of the things that we often talk about is that it is not enough to say that we believe God, but we have to have the courage to act on our belief in God, right? Faith and courage ought to be inextricably tied together. And so the encouragement is to live and act with or in courage. And this is not just about physical prowess. I'm going to knock them down. I'm going to beat them up. I'm going to run them away. I'm going to run them away. That is not what this is about. Courage here means to do something about a bad situation. You're in a battle, right? Maybe in a battle for your life, a battle for your family, right? A battle for your sanity or your community, a battle for life and living for people you might not even know. It takes courage to stand up and do what is right in a world that is challenging you to do so, right? It takes courage to get 2 or 3 little children to say, I'm going to tutor these children and they will graduate from high school. That takes courage. That takes courage to say, I'm going to feed you, right? Not just physically, but I'm going to feed you spiritually as well. The ultimate battle is spiritual anyway, right? It takes courage to do what Paul said in Ephesians chapter 6, right? Be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might to stand against the powers of evil that work. Too many who will confess, I believe in Jesus, but when it's time to take a stand in the spirit, they are nowhere to be found. That's why our prayer team is so important for what we do. Do you think that the forces of evil like it that we speak truth to power? Do you think that this world likes it that we take the money we collect and spend part of it on making sure that people have something to eat? It takes courage to do that kind of stuff, because we very well could settle for having good church and spend all of our stuff, all of our resources on what happens on Sunday morning. That would be the easy thing to do. It's the faithful and courageous. The hard thing to do is to take our resources and say, we're going to be the church in this world, right? I'm thinking about Capital Elementary was just here worshiping with us. That takes courage to step out there and say, we represent God in this secular place. Everybody ain't built for that. So here's the bottom line. We cannot let fear drive us. We have to let God drive us. Be courageous. Last one is another C, committed to the cause. Completely, wholeheartedly committed to the cause. If it's a battle, it will not be over at the snap of a finger. At the moment you decide that you're going to do something about the situation. We will go through some things, right? And in spite of it all, in spite of the challenges, in spite of the battle, in spite of very present enemies, we are wholeheartedly committed to the cause of Christ, committed to making sure that people know that our God died once, but he will never die again. Thank you all very much. Oh, I missed you, Sister Bazille. Let's see. Sister Bazille says that's why some things won't change. We do not want to stand up for ourselves and for one another. Faith is the key. Jesus Christ, the first one to show us that. There it is. There it is. Thank you. Wonderful concluding words for our lesson. Stand up for ourselves. Stand up for the people that can't do it for themselves. Thank you. All right. I mentioned Reverend Williams. And I think Sister Sutton mentioned that she's remembering that family in her prayers. Please do so. This coming Saturday, our youth and young adults have financial literacy opportunity to learn more about what to do with your money. That'll be this coming Saturday starting at 10 here at Elm Grove. We always have worship service that starts at 8:15, and then we feed our sisters and brothers from our community starting at 9. Forgetting something. Let's see if I can find it real quickly. You all might think of it. If you can think of it, please help us out. But we're still in the midst of our 100-year celebration too. Sister Sutton is going to have calendar available for us soon because we're still going on and on. Thank you all very much for all that you do, for being a part of this conversation. I love it when we teach one another. I want you to be careful out there. Heard about somebody with COVID just this weekend. It is still happening. It's just that our crazy government doesn't want the numbers to be reported now, but it's still real. So please be careful. I love all of you. Peace.